Can government embrace disruption in education through technology? I think we all want to know that. So this is a Western Cape perspective, and it is, our speaker is Helen Zille, I believe it's pronounced, Premier of Western Cape Government. So welcome to Helen. Please join me in welcoming Helen.
Hi guys, it's great to be here. Viva Amandla. Thank you very much. It's great to be here, and thanks Esther for that warm introduction. I can hear the Africans and South Africans in the audience. It's wonderful to be here and to be talking about a subject that most people would automatically answer no to. Can government embrace disruption in education through technology? Now, we're hoping that at the end of our term in office, which will be in 2019, the answer will be a resounding yes. But there's a very difficult road to hoe, and we have actually just begun hoeing it and finding out how difficult it is. Now, the key insight that I've had here, or one of the many key insights that I've had here, is how much our presenters take for granted. The environment, the resources, the skills, the connectivity, the data, the whole ecosystem is here, and people work on that basis. Now, we are trying to create it in the Western Cape as a platform for the whole of Africa, and we've got a much better opportunity to do that because we really combine a good, highly developed infrastructure and institutions with a great deal of poverty and underdevelopment, which indeed is the condition of the world if you look across borders. And so we like to call ourselves, beyond the cliche, a world in one country. And if we can get this right and use the government as a big disruptor in education to close that divide, it'll be a very important lesson for the world. But crucially, in Africa specifically, by 2050, it'll be the largest block of humanity on the planet, most of Africans being young, a massive demographic dividend, potentially, for an aging world. And yet it can also be a demographic liability if young people aren't trained and educated for a global economy. And so we have an enormous challenge in Africa, and we in the Western Cape would like to be the pioneers of this, not because we want to be better than any other part of Africa, but because we want Africa to work. And in fact, for the world, South Africa and Africa have to work, because you're facing exactly the same problems, isolated and perhaps a bit insulated in individual countries. So the question is, can governments play the role they have to play? And a capable state is the priority for government playing any role. And if you listen to the person from Singapore and a great many other speakers, they often assume a capable state. And that is another one of our very big challenges across the continent. So this is a crucial question. And my answer to the question, can government embrace disruption in education through technology, is yes, we can, but it is going to be a very hard task. And I've learned a lot about just how hard. We haven't done it enough. We've made a good start, and we're hoping to be a good model for Africa. And every single EdTech company, or any company generally, when you're looking at 2.6 billion people by 2050, better have an Africa strategy, just like you had a China strategy 20 years ago. Now, let me say what the first problem is. Governments are inherently bad at disruption. Not only that, they inherently resist disruption. Now, I am the Premier, which is the equivalent of a governor of the Western Cape province, which would be like a governor of a state in America. And we have a very great deal of power specifically in education, so I'm using my time as well as I can to do all the disruption I can. But I get explained all the time when I want to do things by many of the very competent officials in our government, you don't understand how government works. And I actually don't understand how government works, even though I've been the Premier for 8 years, and I've still got a great deal more to learn about how government can become active in disruption, which is what we really need if we're going to fix our profound education problems. And that problem is actually exacerbated by the fact that we have a major economic divide in South Africa. We have many very wealthy people who can plug into the best facilities in the world, who can get access to networks everywhere and platforms everywhere. And we've got many children who in their lifetime will struggle to learn the English language, which, as you can hear, is the basis of all of the high EdTech solutions in the world. So we have that massive digital divide, and it is only going to get bigger. And the other thing that I've learned is the greater the corruption in any country, the more the regulation and the harder it is to innovate or disrupt. So if you're trying to run a clean government that gets clean audits, disruption is all the more difficult because people are immune and inured to change. They don't want it because no regulation makes provision for it, and any regulation that is broken gets you a qualified audit. So people in the bureaucracy generally say that they're as safe as they can be. They really don't want any innovation because if it goes wrong, there's a crisis. If a risk goes wrong, they will be held liable and they will carry the consequences. And if there's any corruption in the process, they will get a qualified audit. And so that's where the inherent resistance comes from, including the fact that Constitutionalism 101 says that you can only do in government what a rule or a law empowers you to do. And if the rule and the law doesn't empower you to do it, which it obviously can't if it's a disruptive or a new technology, because the rule wasn't designed for that, it was designed for preserving the old, it makes it all the more difficult. And it took me 5 years to understand why I kept hitting my head against a brick wall. So I decided what we have to do is make a big difference. And the first point that I made there is that it's become increasingly evident that we need a new way of delivery, one that is uncompromisingly results-driven, results-focused, and performance-driven. Now, apply that to education. I've applied it to every area of government, but apply that to education. We have got to use technology in education because we just do not have sufficient high-end teachers to make it happen. Technology makes it possible, human beings make it happen, but you have to make sure that the very best teachers are also using technology so that other teachers can make it happen in their classes, learn from it, build from it, and teach their learners from it. And what I've learned here, especially from the young South African EdTech startups here, that when they can circumvent government, they have enormous success in schools. When they have to work through government, they run into a brick wall. Now, that is the first problem, and I have to make sure that it is no longer the problem and that we have to change that fundamentally. So, for example, there is an EdTech startup here, it's called Carry. They went straight to schools and said, we can help you with miscellaneous payments for school outings and a range of other things. They got massive traction with the help of the private sector, but when they came to the thing we really needed, which is their maths and science intervention, they couldn't land it in schools because they had to work through the bureaucracy to land content in schools. And that has been a very crucial insight for me, and that has been critical. So, of course, private sectors, private clients who are wealthy, who are middle class, can buy all kinds of interventions that are available on the market, but poor kids can't. And when you start with a divide like South Africa, the thing that you need more than anything else are mechanisms that close the divide, not grow the divide. And unless you've got a capable state capable of embracing disruption and new technologies in education, you're going to grow that divide. Now, Bridge and other private school innovations are excellent, and I welcome them very much, but they're not enough, because the vast majority of our children can't even afford the school fees that Bridge requires. They have to have free education. And it won't be valuable education until we can disrupt and offer those children the same technology platforms. And that is what we're trying to do with every possible thing that we have. So, in many areas, and not only education, I decided we had to lift some things out of the bureaucracy to get things done. And that's why I started with this concept of game changers. Now you can see that we've got 7 game changers over there that are going to fundamentally change the way people experience the interface with their lives and communities. But also on the right, you'll see that I've established a delivery support unit to make sure that we move on this, that we move on these things and that things don't get stuck in what I call government's wheelbarrow system. You put something in a wheelbarrow, you roll it onto a particular point, you think that the next person's taking over from you to roll it to the next point, you come back 6 months later, and the wheelbarrow is where you left it. The delivery unit is there to make sure that there are no wheelbarrows, especially not in all of those game changers. Very meticulous planning, delivery chains, stock takes, regular meetings, milestones, and crucially, data to test whether you're achieving your objectives. So that's what they are, and fascinatingly, 1, 2, 3, 4 of them are directly linked to EdTech. That is expanding vocational skills and training. That is, obviously, number one in EdTech would be delivering high-speed broadband, which is one of the top priorities of my term in office, rolling out e-learning at schools, which I'll specifically be mentioning now, and expanding quality after-school activities, which crucially also relies on EdTech and e-learning. So 4 out of 7 game changers in the whole government that we've chosen actually focus on e-learning and EdTech. And in fact, the last one, reducing alcohol, it's a different order here. Oh gosh, let me just try and get a pointer here. I'm very good at talking about EdTech, but not very good at using it. Right. Now we're on the wrong page. How did we get on that page? Am I going in the right direction? Where are the game changers? Okay. Right, so now, oh yes, I changed it there. This is the pointer. Right. This apprenticeship is basically skills and vocational development. After schools, this is the electricity one, switch and save. We've done brilliantly on the green economy because switch and save, from having an electricity crisis 3 years ago where the lights kept going off, we now have the fastest growing green economy in the world. As a large result, because of the game changer, we're trying to do exactly that in our e-learning. That connect and learn is the e-learning one. Very importantly, harms reduction is alcohol harms reduction primarily and drugs, and we're trying to use EdTech very much in that one. So broadband is the base, obviously. Harms reduction, very much linked. Connect and learn is e-learning. There it is on top, if you can see it. After schools, apprenticeships, all linked with EdTech. And I was amazed when we picked out those crisis areas, how almost every single one of them is linked to EdTech and e-learning. So now, next, right. Challenges to our education, inherited inequality, increasing learner numbers, large numbers. The city of Cape Town has grown by 30% in the last 10 years in terms of demography. You can imagine what kind of challenge that puts in our schools. Our schools in Khayelitsha, which is a very poor suburb, in the last 4 years, the schools have taken on 30% more pupils. 30% more pupils. So this is really a very, very critical thing. A fiscal squeeze, very poor results, and we need to equip learners. That's the obvious challenge that we face. So, goal of the e-learning game changer, which I'm now focusing on in particular, to enhance the teaching and learning experience of Western Cape learners, predominantly in maths and languages through the use of technology. We have prioritized maths and languages because you may take for granted all of the soft skills that people have been talking about, but you assume then that people can read, write, and calculate, and we cannot assume that. Far too many of our children are leaving school without being able to do that. And so, this is our e-learning game changer. Enhanced teaching and learning in maths and language through the use of ICT, but it needs pillars. We've got 6 pillars to make it work, and they all have to work together. One of the most important, and let me start there, oh gosh, why does it jump in the wrong way, was e-teachers. E-teachers. Now, e-teachers are critical because if your teaching core resists it, or doesn't see themselves as central to the process, they will not buy into it, and it will be very difficult to get the mass acceptance and the mass access to this. So the resistance to change is very significant, especially by undereducated teachers who have not been exposed to technology. And we've had an enormous effort and a very, very large amount of time and workshopping with teachers who are now streaming to our e-learning workshops in their own time on Friday nights, over the weekends, and the take-up has been very significant. Obviously, e-technology is critical. You've got to have the WAN and the LAN, and you've got to have the devices. And bring your own device is actually working quite well because most people have smartphones, and in the young generation, many people are used to learning off smartphones, but the device and the infrastructure is absolutely critical. I'll talk about that in a moment. E-admin to take the administrative burden of schools and teachers, critical. E-infrastructure, the WAN and the LAN and the Wi-Fi. E-culture, the whole idea of not having to put your iPad or your iPhone or your telephone or whatever it is outside of the classroom, but in fact to use it in the classroom, to turn it into a teaching and learning tool and integrate it into the lesson. And then where we are battling most with is e-content, because trying to get that landed is very, very difficult. One other thing that I learned in another session, I know there isn't time to even put in any new insights here, but I learned that e-recruitment of teachers is a fascinating topic, and I'd very much like to include that as the 7th panel. So in the e-infrastructure, that is where we're doing the best. We're connecting all schools to the internet. So far, we've done 1,141 schools on the wide area network. By 2019, we will have done 1,280 of all the 1,500 schools in our state, or in our province, as we call it in South Africa. A fantastic first for Africa, and it'll be absolutely wonderful to have that connectivity as a start. Then, of course, you need the local area networks. You need the local area network. So far, 206 connected to the LAN, but many, many others to Wi-Fi. And we find that we need more than Wi-Fi to create the stability and the reliability that you need to have in the system. Then the learner devices. Delivered 28,000 to date. That's all good. 5,328 smart classroom installs with a whiteboard, with all the devices and everything, makes a massive difference, and we're going to expand that very significantly. And then our IT labs in 910 out of total of 1,365 schools will be done by the year 2019 at the end of our term. So a massive infrastructural base for what we're trying to achieve. Technology in the classroom. As I say, we are driving out the rollout of learner devices, and those are going very well, and more learners are able to bring their own devices. The culture change in schools has been a very important thing. The administration is also critical. Technology in the classroom, okay, now culture change at schools, administration, and then the e-portal. The e-portal is something that I really want to talk about, because we've established an e-portal in the Department of Education where teachers can upload all of their excellent teaching and resource material, where any developer of anything can in fact produce high quality software and other things that people can either get free or purchase, and often there's a combination, let's say 20% free, the rest purchased. So it's a wonderful portal, and there are thousands, literally thousands, of learning resources on that. Today, just over 10,000 resources have been put onto this e-portal that is absolutely aligned to the curriculum. And what we now need is a good rating system so that people can find the best ones and the most useful ones, a reliable rating system that doesn't get people in any way corrupting it. So this has all been very exciting, where learners have had access to this platform and have had access to connectivity and data. We have had spectacular results if they are self-motivated. So we had a very big first in South Africa last year. A young guy who had never done physical science till he was in the 10th grade arrived in the Western Cape from one of the poorest schools in the Eastern Cape, which is a very poor province with none of this infrastructure, came to a very poor school in Philippi, where they at least had this infrastructure, but very, very weak teachers. And through using the infrastructure, he taught himself physics from the beginning, from the grade 10 to the 12th grade, and came number 1 in the province with a full 100%. Now, this is a self-starter, a hard worker, a person who's looking at being an innovator, and he's really driven. And we don't expect that of all of our kids. But if we can integrate e-learning into the classroom, what we have found is that it really makes a significant difference, both to teaching skills and to learner receptivity. And that is a very, very important finding. So this is the game changer that will define our term of office. This is the game changer that will turn around education in South Africa, and we hope in Africa as well, to make sure that we reap this fantastic demographic dividend we've got of so many young people coming up through the system. Also, we've got a massive challenge here. Because government is very bad at the moment in embracing new content, because it's very difficult to get a proper bidding system going, a proper tendering system going, a proper comparative system going with new and disruptive technologies, we're delighted to say that we are moving in the right direction by having an EdTech startup incubator established. And their mandate will be together with government, to evaluate and pilot a whole lot of new EdTech startups in the content delivery space in our schools, and evaluate them and see what works and what doesn't work, so that we can actually put out tenders on the basis of analyzed pilots in order to get the best value for money and bring this experience to every classroom in our province. And then we hope every classroom in our country. Now, it takes an enormous amount of infrastructural investment, of culture change, of teacher training, of leadership at every single level, but it can be done. It is the new generation of intervention. And if we want Africa to be leading in the world, we are going to have to ensure that the young in Africa get all of these opportunities, so that the digital divide does not allow Africa to fall further and further behind the rest of the world. Thank you very much.